They watched from a distance as the birth unfolded, but no one, not even the researchers, was prepared for the father's response. It was the dry season in the Samburu Reserve, and the ground cracked under every step. Dust rose like breath from the earth, and the watering holes withered a little more each day. But amid the heat and silence, something stirred. Her name was Amal, a 30-year-old matriarch, wise, quiet, revered. She had guided her herd through 3 consecutive dry years without losing a calf. She had endured fire. She had outlived poachers. And now, she was about to give birth again. The team from the Wildlife Behavior Institute had tracked Amal's herd for over 6 months. They knew the signs. Her belly heavy, her steps slow. Still, nothing had prepared them for what came next. On a golden morning just after dawn, Amal parted from the herd and walked alone into the acacia grove east of the watering hole, a place elephants rarely ventured. The team followed silently, binoculars up, long lenses steady, radios off. They saw her kneel, then lie down. Moments later, a calf emerged, small, slick with life, wriggling, already searching for her legs. The team whispered into their recorders, healthy, strong, standing quickly. Then came the second. Gasps followed. Twins, someone said. It's twins. But Amal did not rise. She groaned, strained, her body heaved once more. And then, impossibly, a third calf blinking against the harsh morning light. Triplets. The word moved between them like wind. Rare, fragile, real. She lay still, chest rising, trunk twitching. The calves squeaked and fumbled over one another, nudging her flanks. But Amal didn't move. The team held their breath. Then they saw him, emerging from the distance like memory. Tao, the bull, the father. No one had seen Tao for weeks. Bull elephants usually vanish after mating season, traveling alone, nomadic and unknowable. Once considered protectors, now they were seen as displaced. Kings without a throne. But there he was, massive, dust-covered, tusks chipped from battles long past. His ears flicked slowly. His steps were deliberate. He didn't approach the watering hole. He walked straight to Amal. She didn't lift her head, but her trunk reached toward him, trembling in the air until it touched his leg, wrapped around it loosely, held. The calves stumbled around his feet, unsure, eyes wide, tiny trunks raised. In confusion and fear. Tao did not ignore them. He knelt, yes, knelt, and lowered his great head to theirs. One by one, he touched each calf gently with his trunk. The researchers hidden behind brush and lenses were still. No one took a photo, not yet. Amal was breathing, but weakly. The birth had drained her. 3 calves in this heat, on this soil. She couldn't stand. Tao began to pace around her, not restless, but purposeful. Every few steps he paused, lifted his trunk high into the air, sniffing, sensing. He became a sentinel. When a hyena appeared at the tree line drawn by the blood, Tao turned toward it with thunder in his gait. He didn't charge. He didn't need to. The hyena vanished. One of the calves squeaked a confused trumpet. Tao turned, touched its side, stayed close. As the sun dipped low, Amal had still not risen. Her body trembled. The researchers debated intervention, dehydration. She needed water. One suggested they step in. No, said Dr. Reyna quietly. She chose that place, and he's here now. Indeed, Tao was now gently pushing Amal with his tusks. Not forceful, just insistence, encouragement. But she was too weak. Then something no one had ever recorded before happened. Tao moved to the shallow trench Amal had pressed into the earth and began to dig, with trunk and tusks. Slow, methodical. Dust flew. The calves watched. The team froze. Tao dug until the hard red earth gave way to damp clay, then a trickle. Water. Not much, but enough. He scooped it with his trunk, sprayed Amal's skin. Her eyes fluttered. He sprayed her face, her mouth. She drank not from a pond, from him. No one spoke. One researcher reached for her radio. Another stopped her. Let them be, he whispered. Amal slept as the stars rose. Tao stood beside her. The calves huddled close. For the first time in hours, there was no fear, only stillness, and a father standing watch. But he did more than watch. By morning, the wind shifted. The heat had not yet returned, but flies had. They hovered around the calves, crawled across Amal's flanks. She tried to bat them away, but could barely lift her trunk. Tao moved in closer. He swept his massive ears, slow and deliberate, covering her eyes, her mouth, her side. He stood over her like a tree, shielding her from sun and sting alike. One of the calves tried to copy him. It flapped its tiny ears, too short to reach anything, then squeaked in frustration. Tao lowered his head to its level. He didn't scold. He showed. He raised one leg, brought it down beside the calf. A signal. A rhythm. The calf mimicked, awkward, unsteady, but learning. Dr. Rena whispered into her recorder, "He's teaching them. He's teaching them." By the second day, Amal stirred. Her trunk reached again, for Tao, for water, for reassurance. He was there, and with him, more of the herd. It began with a distant trumpet, then dust, then silhouettes, two matriarchs, an elder female, a young male, one of Amal's older calves. They approached slowly, carefully. One matriarch paused beside Tao and pressed her forehead to his flank. No sound, no display. But the researchers understood. It was recognition, permission. The calves, though unsteady, had started mimicking each other. One led, one followed, one wandered, then returned. Each time they fell, Tao was there. Sometimes nudging, sometimes simply waiting, always present, never panicked. On the third night, Amal stood. Not gracefully, her legs shook, her breath wheezed, but she rose. Tao stepped back, gave her space. The calves rushed to her. She greeted them with low, rumbling calls, each one distinct. They calmed, they listened. Then, curiously, they circled back to Tao, not for comfort, for balance. At sunrise, the herd gathered around her. Amal led them toward the western ridge. Tao did not follow. He stayed behind, standing at the grove's edge, watching. It was the youngest calf who turned first. It walked back to him, pressed its small forehead against his leg, and stood quietly, as if to say, "I see you." "I remember." Then it turned and followed its mother. Tao watched until they vanished into dust. Then he walked to the trench, touched the dark earth with his trunk, and slowly covered it. That was the moment a researcher finally hit the record button. But only a sentence was captured, not an image. He never needed to be asked. He only needed to be trusted. That line would become the title of a research paper, then a documentary, then a mural in a school for children who had lost their fathers. But before all that, it lived only in silence after Tao walked away. He didn't rejoin the herd that day. Instead, he climbed the high rocks above the valley, where elephants rarely linger. From there, he could see everything. The watering hole, the grove, the trail Amal and her calves had taken, the trench he had dug. He stood for hours, not grazing, not resting, just watching. The researchers debated whether to approach. Dr. Rena was firm. "Intervention erases observation," she said. "We're here to witness, not to disrupt." Still, they couldn't look away. Tao's behavior didn't fit any model. He wasn't guarding. He wasn't asserting dominance. He wasn't behaving like a typical bull. He was choosing. Word of the triplet birth had already reached the capital. Park officials, international researchers. A rare event. A miracle. It needed monitoring. But the footage of Tao changed everything, because no one had ever seen what he did next. 2 days after Amal and her calves left, a lone hyena pack crept into the grove, likely following the scent left in the soil. Tao returned, not with rage, but with precision. He herded them away, not with force, but through movement. He blocked their path, disoriented them, scattered them, without a sound. And then, in a motion captured by 3 separate lenses, he turned back. He flattened the trench. Every trace of blood, birth, and scent was erased. It was an act of protection, but also erasure, as if saying, "This chapter is over. I have finished what I came to do." He disappeared the next morning, not into violence or chaos, but into the trees, and was not seen again for 3 years. But he was remembered by Amali, who returned to the grove each season, pausing beneath the same acacia, by the calves, who now walked strong, sometimes circling each other, the same way he once circled them, by the researchers who used his story to teach new rangers that leadership wasn't always loud, and by a little girl in a nearby village who pointed to the mural on her school wall depicting a massive bull elephant watching over 3 tiny calves beneath the stars. "That's the elephant who watched the babies," she said. "And that," she whispered, "is what real strength looks like." The teacher standing nearby heard her, but instead of correcting or explaining the mural in scientific terms, she simply nodded. "Exactly," she said, then turned to the class. "Today, we draw what strength means to us." That afternoon, 15 children sketched their versions of Tao, some under stars, some beside Amali, one with his trunk wrapped around a calf like a blanket. Not a single drawing showed Tao roaring or charging. Every version of him was still, watching. Back at the reserve, a new team of researchers arrived the following season. Graduate students from 4 countries, eager, brilliant, heavily trained in behavioral metrics. They asked about the triplets, about Amali, about Tao. Dr. Rena led them to the field. "This is where it happened," she said, pointing to the grove. They began pulling out sensors, drones, infrared cameras. She waited, then said gently, "If you're only looking for numbers, you'll miss the story." They looked confused. Then she pulled out a weathered field journal. Handwritten notes, no charts, just observations, feelings. She turned to a page. It read, Day 2. Tao shaded Amali with his body for 4 hours, moved only to drink and return. Calves followed his shape like a shadow. Wind still, time didn't exist. One student read the line twice, then asked quietly, "Did he know what he was doing?" Dr. Rena smiled. "Maybe the better question is, did we?" That year, Tao became part of the park's ranger training materials, not as a case study in alpha behavior, but as a module in presence, in non-interference, in relational intelligence. They called it the Sentinel model. Elsewhere, Tao's story found its way into unexpected places. A counselor used it in group therapy with foster teens. A young woman in Kenya painted a full mural of him across a clinic wall, trunk outstretched, toward 3 blooming trees, 1 for each calf. A local poet wrote, "He did not rule, he did not roar, he stood." And that changed everything. Still, the grove remained untouched. Visitors could view it, but only from a distance. No flash photography, no loud speaking, just reflection. Some said they could still feel him there, as if Tao's choice, to stay, not out of power but out of care, had seeped into the roots of the land itself. A silence that held weight, a presence that did not fade. Because even when Tao himself was no longer visible, his choices continued to ripple. Through the herd, through the soil, through the people who once thought elephants were only muscle and memory. Amali returned each year with her calves. They were taller now, stronger. One had a slight curve in its right tusk, a perfect mirror of Tao's. Another had developed the habit of circling before lying down, and the smallest one, still fond of nudging the others with its forehead, had taken to standing watch while the rest of the herd drank, like he had, as if something of him had lived on, not by blood, but by behavior, not instinct, imitation, reverence. The grove where the triplets were born had become a sacred site, not just among rangers and researchers, but among local communities. Elders brought children there to sit in the shade of the acacia, not to speak, but to feel. A small stone marker had been placed at the base of the central tree. It didn't name him. It didn't say Tao. It simply read, "He stood." One evening during the last light of the dry season, a young filmmaker visited the reserve. She had heard the story years ago from her grandmother, who worked as a cook at the old ranger station. She asked to be taken to the grove. The new ranger, no older than 25, nodded silently. He had never seen Tao, but he had studied him, watched the footage, memorized the notes, heard the way people said his name like a prayer. When they arrived, the woman stepped from the truck barefoot. She walked slowly to the marker and knelt. Then, in the softest voice, she said, "My father was never around, but this story, this elephant, taught me what being there means." As she stood, the wind picked up, carrying dust, seed, and something else. The ranger felt it too, and for just a moment neither of them spoke, because the grove didn't need words. It held presence, and presence was enough. Because sometimes, legacy doesn't wear a crown. Sometimes it moves in quiet rhythms, in how a younger bull waits before stepping forward, how a calf pauses before drinking, how a ranger stands still before raising his voice. Tao had never led a herd. He had never been the biggest, or the fastest, or the loudest. But in the story that remained, he had become something far more enduring. A model, a myth grounded in memory, a mirror for those who had forgotten what leadership could look like. In a university lecture hall halfway across the world, his story was taught not in biology, but in ethics. A professor showed the footage of Tao kneeling beside the newborns, of digging the trench, of shielding Amali from the sun, then turned to the class and asked, "Would you recognize this as leadership if it wasn't from a human?" No one spoke for a long moment. Then one student whispered, "It's the kind we need more of." In a school in northern Kenya, children reenacted the birth scene in a theater play. One boy played Tao. He didn't say a word. He just walked on stage when the music turned soft, stood beside the girl playing Amali, and spread his arms wide, like wings to shield her. When the lights faded, no one clapped right away. They just sat still, moved. And a grandmother in the second row wiped a tear from her cheek and said, "He reminded me of my husband." Back at the grove, nature did what it always does. It kept growing. The trench where Tao once dug filled in, with time, then rain, then tiny green shoots that wrapped around the old roots. Each season the calves returned, first with Amali, then with their own young. No one told them to. They just came. And somewhere in the quiet, beyond the trees, beyond the dust, beyond even memory itself, there was still the shape of a great elephant's presence. Not seen but felt. In the pause between footfalls, in the hush before dawn, in the way the day world sometimes holds its breath and simply stands. 15 years later, the grove had changed. The tree that once shaded Amali during her weakest hours was now twisted and wide, its roots thick and tangled around the earth like veins. Grass grew where dry dirt had once cracked, and beneath it, the shallow dip Tao had dug was now a permanent hollow lined with soft moss filled with rain during the wet season. Locals called it Tao's Bowl. They said it never dried completely, not even in the worst droughts. Amali had long passed. Her triplets, now full grown, returned once a year. Always. Together. They walked the grove in silence, touching trunks near the base of the tree, circling once, then leaving without a sound. One of them, the one with the curved tusk, had a calf of her own now. The little one had a strange habit for such a young elephant. Whenever it felt afraid, it would walk away from the group, stand alone for a moment, and look back, as if expecting someone to be there, as if listening for something without sound. The researchers changed, generations passed, but the field notes remained, kept in a locked wooden cabinet at the edge of the observation tower, now faded by sun. The notebook sat on top of all the others. It was always the first book new students were asked to read. The first page had no data, only a sentence. He gave more than protection. He gave the right to be small in a world too large. And sometimes, just before dawn, when the fog hugged the hills, a single figure could be seen from the tower, standing far in the distance. Too large for a bush, too tall for a tree. Never moving, never approaching, but always there. A presence. In the mist. A reminder that the strongest ones are not always the ones who charge forward, but the ones who stay when no one asks them to. If this story touched you, like, share, and subscribe.